I thought there were a few elements through the season that I thought were really interesting. I thought his fight with the cops was pretty interesting. Like that scene where
And
he's
we should
straight
provide context that these are crooked police
crooked,
officers
horrible police officer. Sorry.
that have
I
been
love,
recruited by Kingpin as so he
I have
finds
lots
all
of,
of
oh goodness. Yes, you're right. I think the police are
I thought it
great.
was great when they beat up all those police officers. It's like, well, Matt, that's horrible.
Welcome to episode 7 of Legalese. My name's Matt Patton. I'm with my brother Mike Patton, and we
Hello.
are here to discuss legal topics and whatever else is happening to catch our interest this week. Mike, I was hoping we could come up with a name for the second part of the show.
The segment
The segment.
where we talk about nothing.
Yeah, well,
The
I kind of like
the
that.
mo the more entertaining nonsense nothing segment.
Ah, the nonsense portion. Uh-huh. The nothing portion. These are all strong contenders. If you are watching, leave a comment and give us a suggestion for what to name the second half of our show. Um, I did think this week, instead of pretending like we don't know what we're about to talk about, we could just tell the viewer in the second half of the show, we will be arguing about whether or not Daredevil Born Again is a good show. There may be spoilers, so if you don't want spoilers, maybe just watch the first half. Go watch the show and then come back and watch it. Um,
Yeah. The Daredevil, if you're not familiar, is a Marvel superhero that just recently got renewed on Disney Plus, and so we will be expecting our check from Disney for plugging their show. We have no sponsors. We're just throwing
no,
that out there.
no
Uh,
sponsors.
just us. So but it used to be on Netflix, and now it's on Disney. So
Mike, I'm going to try to use a thumbnail in our thumbnail, a picture of you behind that desk that says, I don't like Daredevil Born Again, change my mind.
sounds good. I mean, yeah, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. But first, we're going to keep going on work comp. Today, we're going to maybe just walk through the process a little bit so that
Sure.
if somebody's coming to this video to try to learn about work comp, they might get a picture of the different kinds of things they might expect in the work comp process. Um,
Sure.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So work comp is like we've been talking about, is a statutorily driven uh, procedure, which is s- somewhat different than a civil case, because civil case you could get into civil district court. Everything in work comp is created by statute, which we've talked about. So the legislature wrote a law that created a job for the Department of Labor to conduct these cases. So your entire case is in front of an administrative law judge, and that judge is the case of first impression, the first judge to hear your case. You can appeal to an appeals board, and then that can appeal into civil court, into the district, or actually not the district court, into the directly to the Court of Appeals, which is somewhat unique. Other administrative actions, if you wanted to know, actually appeal through the Shawnee County District Court, which when I was a law clerk, incidentally, was my job to help write those decisions for the district court judges a long time ago. But
So, so if I'm injured in the job, um, let's start there. Let's say I have some kind of injury. We keep going back to the shoulder thing. So let's say I have a shoulder injury, and I think maybe both of us have had shoulder injuries. Maybe that's why I keep going there.
I'm anticipating Matt filing a shoulder work comp case after he's like, keep telling me about how the shoulder stuff
Oh,
works.
that's fantastic. My shoulder's feeling great, by the way. Um,
Good. Good. You got
So
to say that for the record now. I get it.
if I did have a shoulder injury at work, what would I do next? And maybe we can go from there and just kind of walk through the process from there.
Very first thing is to give your employer notice of the injury, which we've talked about. And you want to give notice as soon as possible because there are short deadlines. Generally, it's a 30-day deadline to tell your employer. I don't I don't recommend waiting 30 days because in my experience, employers get skeptical if they don't know about it right away. Not all employers, but some. Uh, so notify your employer as soon as you feel there's an injury. And it's pretty common for an employee to say, tell their supervisor, hey, my shoulder hurts. I don't know what's going on. And then the supervisor can take the lead from there. But what's supposed to happen is once you report an injury, they will file a report with the Department of Labor and they will try to determine whether you need medical treatment. If you need medical treatment, it's their job to get that for you. And so a lot of times, some of the larger employers, like Goodyear, for example, they have what they call a dispensary. I don't think they still call it a dispensary, but everyone still calls it that, where it's a medical clinic on site and they'll send you there first. Most smaller employers don't have that. They'll get you to a clinic that usually they have a designated work care clinic. If it's a major injury, let's say your shoulder gets skewered by something horrible, which of course I've seen, then they'll get you to the ER. So
So
that's the first thing is
is
telling your employer.
is there ever any confusion about who your direct report is, who you're supposed to be notifying, or is that usually people have a good idea about what to do there?
Yeah, usually it's just your supervisor. So the statute has some guidance on that, and I don't have it in front of me. But generally speaking, if you tell your supervisor, that's who you're supposed to tell. They're supposed to have it posted who you should tell directly, but generally supervisor.
And is like a text message sufficient?
Text message is great because then you have a copy of it.
Mhm.
But usually, as a practical matter, it's verbal first. And then I recommend you follow up with something in writing, like an email or a text message just saying, hey, I let you know about this specific shoulder injury that happened today while at work. And that's something I've seen before as far as notice goes, where an employee will say, oh, we texted about it. And then you look, and then the employer says, we never knew about this. And then you look at the text messages and they're not clear. They're just talking about, hey, I'm going to a doctor. And it doesn't say why you are going to a doctor or doesn't say that it's work related. That's not sufficient notice. You have to say, I hurt my shoulder at work and I would like medical treatment for that.
That's good.
Uh,
That's helpful.
so,
Okay, so I've hurt my shoulder and it seems like I'm really impaired. I should really see a doctor about this. Um, and you said they assign a doctor or they find a doctor for you?
yeah, the statute says that it is the employer's job to provide medical treatment. And so they pick an authorized treating provider. Most of the time, that's through a work care clinic. So there are occupational medicine specialists uh, that do occupational medicine. So both hospitals in Topeka have one. There's many, many work care clinics in throughout Johnson County and Wyandotte County. So it just varies on who your employer is, who their work care clinician is. So that's a general uh, facility that will offer treatment on the front end, assign out physical therapy typically. And then if frankly, if symptoms don't resolve through conservative treatment like physical therapy, then you would move on to getting an MRI, getting assigned to a shoulder specialist, typically a surgeon. In the cases that I see, that's what's typical. I'm sure there are far more cases that don't get to my desk where they get They go to work, they report it to their boss, they go to work care, they have some physical therapy, shoulder symptoms resolve, and that's it.
So let's say I've notified my boss. I need medical care. I've told them I've been waiting around for 3 months, and I still haven't gotten a doctor's appointment scheduled. What do I do now?
At that point, that is the situation where you absolutely, and you don't need to wait 3 months, but if you're just not getting anywhere, you're not getting a doctor sign, you don't have a medical appointment scheduled. And that sadly, a more common situation than I wish it was. And also, we get the bad cases, right? When things aren't going right, that's when someone hires a lawyer. But if that's the situation, you should call an attorney. And what we do, our process within the work comp case, one, we file it with the Department of Labor. Two, we send what's called a 7-day demand. And three, at the end of 7 days, and 7-day demand for treatment and whatever benefit that other benefit you need. Often that's temporary total disability, which is the weekly check, which we've talked about. And at the end of 7 days, if they have not provided that benefit, you file for a preliminary hearing. That preliminary hearing, you can discuss issues like treatment, off work slips, and compensability. So those are kind of the three big issues in a preliminary hearing. Sometimes we talk about supplemental pay or temporary partial disability, which is if you're just making less because of your work injury, you can get some supplemental pay. But those are the issues that are at play. Also, payment of medical bills and medical mileage.
Why don't you
So
unpack? I don't know how much time we spent talking about these TPD and TTD. Unpack those a little bit more.
TTD is temporary total disability, and that is a check while you're off work during your treatment for an injury. So if a doctor says, there's two situations where you get it. A doctor says you are off work, and then they have to pay you 2/3 of your average weekly wage looking back 6 months. But it's not taxable. So you end up a little short, but close-ish unless you're subject to that cap that we've talked about before. So so that's TTD. So if they're not paying you that for whatever reason, we send a demand and then we set a hearing and we have a hearing on it. Most often we get that resolved without having to have the hearing, but not always. And the judge, the administrative law judge, you go in for usually 30-minute to an hour hearing, depending on how contentious the issues are. The judge will take testimony and decide the issues, and we'll submit medical records and evidence. And these hearings typically, like I said, are 30 minutes to an hour, but they can last a great deal of time if the case is complex. I had one that lasted 2.5 days. So it was like a trial in the sense that we had all these witnesses, all of these issues to sort out. And it was because of how many parties were involved in the accident. And so there were multiple claimants, multiple lawyers. And so it
Wow.
was a fairly unique situation. Most of the time, it's not that. So that's the preliminary hearing. And so compensability, whether the case gets paid under work comp, is often litigated on that front end at the preliminary hearing stage. It can be relitigated at the trial setting or the regular hearing setting at the end of the case, but often the issues have already been decided by a judge, so we don't have a lot of fighting over whether this case should be paid under work comp on the back end.
Cool.
Usually we know because it's been denied, and then we fight it at the preliminary hearing stage. So once you've had a preliminary hearing, you're getting all of your medical benefits, you're getting paid while you're off work. And circling back to TTD or temporary total disability, the other situation where you can get that is if a doctor just gives you temporary restrictions, then you get that uh, inlet, then you go get or you go work within that accommodation unless your employer can't accommodate you, which happens a lot. Let's say you have a 10-pound lifting restriction, but your job is to throw 30-pound tires all the time, and they don't have any accommodated work. then in that situation, you would go on TTD. So different employers handle that differently. Some will just say, we don't offer accommodated work. We send you to, um, we put you off. Others would rather have you there, even if you're sorting nails. I've had
Mhm.
clients do that sort of thing, and that can be frustrating for employees. But I tell them if they're going to pay you to be there, you do what they have you doing,
Yeah.
and most people are comfortable with that.
An important question before we wrap this part of the discussion up. Can the employer fire you for having filed a work comp claim?
It would be illegal for them to fire you because you filed a workers' compensation claim. Now, does that happen? Of course it does. There are bad actors in this world, and that occurs. The problem is if they fire you for another reason that is legal, that makes it very difficult because the framework is what we call the McDonnell Douglas framework, which is imported law from race discrimination cases. Uh, but so it is the terminated employee's job to say they've got a what's called a prima facie case. This is actually a kind of complicated
Should
question.
we do another episode on this one,
We
actually?
could do a whole episode on that issue,
Uh-huh.
but the short answer is it is illegal. Um, and if they do, and you can prove that it was because you filed a workers' compensation case, you have a wrongful termination case. And so it is illegal to discriminate against someone. There's clear Kansas case law. It's a termination against public policy, and employers should not do that.
Cool. Okay. So next week we'll come back and we'll kind of look at the back half of this process. Um, but let's go ahead and move on to the second portion of the segment of the show, which we have yet to name.
The
Um,
nonsense.
the nonsense portion, perhaps. Um, so we're going to talk about Daredevil, Daredevil Born Again. Um, I liked it. Mike, you didn't like it so much. So, go ahead and make your case.
So here is my hot take on Daredevil Born Again. And again, if you're planning on watching this show, spoilers from here on out. So the season opens with a great scene where Daredevil fights his nemesis, Bullseye, and it's a actually a awesome action sequence. They shot it in one take, and so they're like going upstairs, and Daredevil is getting
He's got
stabbed, and
knives sticking out of him.
yeah, very cool, very fun action, and I was so excited. I was like, "Let's go! This is amazing!" Daredevil's kicking butt, super fun to watch. But unfortunately, Daredevil's law partner, because Daredevil is a lawyer, gets murdered in the process of this fight. So this is really the first scene of the show, and Daredevil chooses to try to murder Bullseye. He throws him off a building, or really just kind of shoves him because he's already beat him. And so that begins this process of Daredevil saying, I crossed the line. I shouldn't be Daredevil anymore. And he's trying to do good for the city of New York by being a lawyer, which sounds fine. I mean, you can do a lot of good as a lawyer, right? I hope. So it should be uh, a show I like because you've got a lawyer as a hero who kicks butt. But it was just so annoying because then for the rest of the season, Daredevil is just kind of a sad sack guy. And he's just like, oh, I don't know if I want to be Daredevil. And we're like, you're gonna be Daredevil again. Otherwise, there's no show. And there was one episode which I didn't like where his law firm is struggling. And so he goes and tries to get a loan, which is a stupid thing. I don't know. I'm sure there are lawyers that finance when they're in trouble, but it's just we have a business model where you can get a retainer, do that. There's other things you can do. Um, and so I'm like, this is stupid. And then he gets taken hostage and then has to like beat up the bad guys. And then he still doesn't get the loan. I don't know. It was dumb.
Well, the interesting thing about that episode was um, he ends up fighting the like thug who's holding up the bank, and it's like a tough fight for him. Here he is, this literal superhero, and he's in a fist fight with just a thug, and he's struggling a little bit. So I'm
Yeah.
like, it's a weird moment, particularly when they're trying to incorporate him into the MCU with like, Thor.
He's, he clearly would not be able to fight Thor. Um,
Yeah.
but, but yeah, so I was just annoyed with Matt Murdock, the hero, Daredevil, was not being very heroic, I thought. Although it had good moments where he goes and he saves a little girl from another supervillain who was super creepy, super creepy. Um, and so it wasn't all bad. I watched the whole series, but I was just annoyed that he was struck. That was the main arc.
Hmm.
What was interesting was they were paralleling him with the villain the whole series. Who the villain is Kingpin, and Kingpin leaves a life of crime and goes into politics, and so he runs for mayor, becomes mayor of New York, and then he's kind of struggling with his identity.
Really
Like,
parallel paths, if we're being honest.
yeah, yeah. So it's like his,
King, yeah, never mind.
I got it. I was slow on the uptake there. But so they're paralleling Kingpin leaving crime to go do politics, and so they're both getting pulled back into their previous roles throughout the series. Um, Culminating in the biggest spoiler, which I also am kind of annoyed with. So Bullseye does not get killed. I feel like I'm talking too much, like explaining all this. Bullseye doesn't die when he gets thrown off the roof. He eventually escapes, and he goes after Kingpin because he thinks Kingpin set him up. Um, and so they're all at a big ball dancing, and Bullseye is about to kill Kingpin, and Daredevil saves him. And Kingpin is really bad, guys. He's really bad. Got to trust me on this. And then he saves him. And you're just like, why did you save Kingpin? Like they were gonna take care of it, solve a lot of problems. And so
Yeah,
that
I think
is my gripe
that's fair.
with, yeah,
That's fair. I think probably most of the audience was pretty frustrated by that moment. Uh, I was genuinely shocked. Like I was like very surprised by that, which I think I enjoyed it because I just did not see that coming. Um, it's got 87% on Rotten Tomatoes, so I've gotten that in
pretty
my
good.
corner. Um,
And Matt Murdock hates Kingpin. He hates
mhm.
him. He really hates him. He's like ruining his relationship with his girlfriend over how much he hates Kingpin. Well,
But there is a little bit of a gospel connection there. You know, dying for people who hate him. I don't know, maybe.
yeah. And Matt Murdock is a good Christian. So, or, I mean,
He
yeah,
is. He is.
very
Well, I
faithful.
don't know. I couldn't there the spiritual elements to this season I was kind of a little bit disappointed in. I feel like
They're
they spent a lot
pretty
more time
muted. Yeah.
mhm, in the first few seasons exploring that, and this time barely anything.
Yeah.
Um, but I I did feel like they had a missed opportunity. Um, they kind of underdeveloped the Freudian elements because they have a psychiatrist as one of the main characters, and the villain there's sort of this dialogue about one of the main villains, and I think that's kind of interesting. Just the idea of like we have this persona that's kind of buried, um, you know, the id, so to speak, and we present this. I forget how it works. I think it's the ego that's up front that people can see, and and that's kind of what a superhero is in a way. It's like the id is the thing that sort of becomes forefront as the inner self comes out and fights all the bad guys with a lot of violence, but it's still masked, you know. And that was the same thing with one of the villains, this sort of like id coming forward. And I think that was kind of like that would be really interesting, but they really didn't talk about it much, maybe a
It, w-
little bit.
yeah, it was a subtle theme throughout, like which is the real persona, like Matt Murdock as an attorney or Daredevil who fights, and so that was interesting, and that the other villain, I forget what his name was, Inkblot, I don't know.
He was really, yeah, he was so creepy.
He was creepy.
Muse,
Muse,
M-U-S-E,
that's what it
Muse, yeah.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I see what you're saying, but so why is it so compelling to you that Matt Murdock doesn't do what he wants to do, but instead sacrifices himself by taking a bullet for Kingpin?
I think
I,
one of the things that caught my attention there was uh, the Daredevil kind of he loses the Daredevil character, the Daredevil persona when he tries to kill Bullseye because he sort of like violates the conscience, uh, the ethic of Daredevil. But then it's sort of when he does that act of self-sacrifice, Daredevil is kind of reborn because he's living into the ethic of Daredevil again. Um, and so born again, you know. So I thought that was kind of a really cool way to solve the tension of the season and kind of revive Daredevil, so to speak. Um, but I thought there were a few elements through the season that I thought were really interesting. I thought his fight with the cops was pretty interesting, like that scene where
and
he's
we should
straight
provide context that these are crooked police
crooked,
officers
horrible police officers. Sorry,
that have
I
been
love.
recruited by Kingpin as so he
I have
finds
lots
all
of.
of.
Oh goodness, yes, you're right. I think the police are
I thought it
great.
was great when they beat up all those police officers. It's like, well, Matt, that's horrible.
Oh, you know what I mean. They were
I
crooked
do.
cops.
They were, and they made it clear that these were really evil guys, and so doing really terrible things, up to and including murdering innocent people.
Yeah.
So these were bad guys.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but Daredevil goes on this at the end of it. That was the best scene I thought of the entire season. Like he goes against all odds and just goes on a rampage with Punisher, which is fun because Punisher is fun. And so he's trying to keep Punisher from killing all these people. So he's beating him up, and then yeah, it,
I did think
it,
that the season was a little anticlimactic.
because yeah,
Because they get to the end and he's like about to kind of go into the final battle, and he's like, "I need to build an army." Was kind of what he said, and I'm like, "Okay, we're not gonna go in for the big final fight, and we're just gonna
yeah,
end the season."
and I
Okay.
wonder if that's like them wanting to then build into the rest of Marvel, because that's the unique thing about they're bringing him into the Marvel Cinematic Universe because he was separate when it was on Netflix. So I'm guessing that I haven't read anything about what they're going to do with that, but I
Or
did
maybe
watch
they'll bring in a
Thunderbolt.
few more characters from, yeah, that would
Yeah,
be interesting.
he would fit in with the Thunderbolts people, I think, pretty well. I
Yeah.
watched that movie. That was a fun movie. The
I haven't
it
seen it
was
yet, but I am
so I
excited to
won't
see that too.
spoil it for you, but you should go see it. It was fun.
Cool.
It also pretty well rated. I thought it was a more thoughtful Marvel movie in terms of like the major theme is mental health there too, which is really strange that I guess that was a theme in Daredevil because it's like these are inherently silly stories, right? You got superheroes and all that, then but you also have timeless archetypes of selflessness, rebirth. Oh, I
Yeah,
love them.
I love him too.
So, my wife always makes fun of them. She's like, "Did the good guys win?" I was like, "They don't always win. That one one time Thanos won until the next movie when
Until the next movie.
yeah,
Uh, my father-in-law is a big movie buff, and he hates all the Marvel stuff. So,
it's
eh,
so dominated movie
yeah,
making. So if you were not into that genre and you loved movies, that would be frustrating.
yep.
I'll give your father-in-law that for sure. But well, that is our hot take on Daredevil. Go
Daredevil
watch
Born
it.
Again. Go watch it.
Oh,
Well,
although if yeah,
hopefully you've already seen it.
we ruined it for you if you haven't. So
Well, thanks for
uh
tuning in.
yeah, let us know if you have any nonsense subjects you'd like us to tackle. We'd be
Yes.
happy to discuss that nonsense because we're obviously scraping the bottom of the barrel. Like we both watched
or
this TV series.
or no nonsense. If you have some legal topics you'd love us to explore, if it's something that Mike doesn't practice, we could find another attorney to bring on and discuss that as well. So, yeah, let us know in the comments. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next week.